Hello, and we are reading the story called Miss Hickory. It's a strange little story, a childhood favorite of mine, and we are on Chapter 7, The Runaway Fawn. Let's see what happens next. The Runaway Fawn. The first lesson that Fawn learned was the lay of the land. Doe, his mother, taught him. He seldom saw the great antlered buck, his father, but Doe was by Fawn's side from sunrise until sunset, and he slept beside her in the old lost cellar hole that was their home, close to her soft brown coat for warmth. Fawn was newborn that season, a dappled deer creature with hoofs like fairy feet and eyes that were hazel brown and caught and held the sunlight. His eyes could hold tears, though, if Doe left him in the grass or among soft bushes. She ran alone once in a while to teach him to take care of himself. The cellar hole that had once held a home had been abandoned for many years. None but a dweller of the forest could have found it, for its road was lost. Its stones were overgrown with wild briar and sumac, and the old gray birches that had sprouted around it were now tall and arched by the winds into a roof. But the cellar hole could remember. There, on one side, a brick fireplace had once stood, with the bean pot snugly simmering in its oven, the andirons holding 4-foot logs, and a mother rocking a cradle and knitting on the wide hearth. The cellar hole remembered spinning wheels and sleigh bells, sizzling donuts, and molasses cookies, fishing tackle, guns, singing school and Bible readings, hardships and laughter, snowdrifts and white lilacs. Now it was nothing but an ancient memory book of things past. The thicket of black alder, pine, and hemlock that led to it kept its pages closed to all except those who loved the country. And when Doe had been searching for a safe home for her fallow deer, the cellar hole had seemed right. There was not even a footpath where the long-lost road had led to its smoky chimney. Granite rocks covered with lichen and moss were the only signposts. Lying within the shelter of the cellar hole, Doe licked Fawn with her caressing tongue, and the wind among the pine trees sang him to sleep. Where the road begins is east, Doe told Fawn. Next spring, when your legs are fleeter, you may go that way for an adventure. There are gardens with peas and beans to nibble. Oh, I hate that when they get in my garden, though. Young fruit trees with sweet bark, pears and cherries lying on the ground, and rosebuds to nibble for your dessert. Once I looked in through a kitchen window. I saw pumpkin pies on the table, but that is not a safe trip for you yet. East is where the sun rises. When you run east, remember that your hoofprints are plainly to be seen. Then Doe spoke of the west. The road home towards the woods and the sunset lies west. We pass the barn at the north and follow the acre piece close to the woods. There are a few ancient and neglected apple trees within its walls. We shall find the buds on the acre piece. Apple trees are good eating. On the other side of the road is the orchard where the Gravensteins, the Winesaps, the Northern Spies, the Baldwins, and the Macintoshes climb the hill. Avoid the orchard, Doe warned him. Don't run south, she advised. None of our family run that way. Only birds go south in the winter. The north. Doe lifted her great dark eyes in a daydream. Her father came from the north. He came to me from the forests of the north, swimming the mountain streams with trailing waterweeds and vines streaming from his antlers. He came with the herd, homing for the winter. The others went up the side of the mountain, but your father stayed here in the valley with me. Where is he now? Fawn asked, pawing the earth in impatience to be trailing. I've not seen your father since the hunting season began. Listen, mark my words. Stay close to home until the snow drifts. If you hear a loud noise or a crackling in the bushes, But Fawn could endure his mother's lessons no longer. He raised his small pointed ears to catch the good scents of the forest. He poised a moment, like a bird ready for flight. Then he was off, swift and carefree, tiny hoof marks in the fresh light snow, close together as he ran, then far apart as he leaped, so Fawn left his trail away from the cellar hole. He was spotted tan and white, like the moving shadows of the woods, and thus invisible. He was so young and so fleet that adventure was all that impelled him. Off to the east, Fawn thought. I must look in that kitchen window. Out of the forest, on winged hoofs, leaping stone walls, trailing close to the brown tree trunks that hid him, Fawn crossed the acre piece, past the barn, and came to the garden of the old place. All was still. There were no footprints on the white page of new snow. Fawn stepped delicately up the back steps, put his front feet on the windowsill, and tried to peep in the kitchen. Alas, the curtains were drawn. He could not see a single pie, as he had hoped to do. And suddenly a rustling in the bare lilac bushes at the back of the house startled Fawn. He saw a little house built on corn cobs that stood beneath the lilac bush. It seemed deserted. No smoke arose from the chimney, and a small snowdrift covered the windows. Fawn bravely came closer to the corn-cob house, sniffing it delicately. But a tiny pointed red face appeared at the door. Then a striped coat and a furiously waving tail. Chipmunk chattered, "No trespassers!" And with a beating heart and flying feet, Fawn was off toward the orchard. He found tasty roots and bark to eat in the orchard. He nestled through the snow and the thick blanket of grasses and leaves deep into the warm ground where berries and juicy vine leaves waited, eating, sniffing the rich soil, raising his head to feel the falling stars of snow. Fawn felt quite safe and happy with the new strength in his limbs. Now and then his head felt ticklish, as if with a hint of sprouting antlers. He would, he thought, explain to Doe that he was growing up fast. He could and would run alone, returning to her, of course, at night. Crash, bang! The quiet air was broken with echoes of terror. A gun! Fawn had heard the hunter's gun before. He suddenly realized that he was alone. He leaped there, in panic as he tried to remember the way home. He bounded down through the orchard, crossed the road, and stood, unprotected, for a space in the acre piece, trying to remember where the west lay. The sun was high, no help at all in showing him where he would set, but presently, as Fawn looked down, he saw what seemed to be a bright round red berry laying at his feet on top of the snow. What was it that? As Fawn dipped his little pointed nose toward the red berry, it disappeared, and when he pawed away the snow, he came upon nothing but stubble. It was a mystery. He discovered more of the round red spots in the snow of the acre piece and followed them until they led to the edge of the forest. Each one was gone, as if it had been gleam of will-o'-the-wisp fire as Fawn touched it with his nose or hoof. He had forgotten about the crash of the gun as he found his way home, following the crimson trail into the woods, so familiar and safe. He hardly noticed that the red spots on the snow drew a line of red as he followed them. The first snow was so light that it had not yet covered the floor of the forest. Fawn had no difficulty at last in finding the cellar hole. He had a great deal to tell his mother, how he had looked in a window, how he had seen a chipmunk who lived in a corncob house, how Doe knew best about staying close to home during the hunting season. He gave one happy leap into the old cellar hole, but it was empty. And although Fawn looked for Doe until sunset, blind with the tears in his great dark eyes, he did not find her. At last, when the forest was too dark to trail, Fawn understood that Doe must have been looking for him, following him, watching over him, when he had heard the crashing gunfire. He came back and lay down in their cellar hole, cold, shaking with sorrow and fear, all alone. Oh, it's so sad. That's what the red dots were. Well, and we'll pick it up there to see how Fawn turns out with this sad part of the story. Until next time.